The sun was just beginning to rise over the city, casting a golden glow on its ancient buildings and narrow streets. Tourists from every corner of the globe had already started their day, eager to explore the wonders this historic place had to offer. The air buzzed with excitement as people snapped photos, browsed through colorful markets, and marveled at centuries-old architecture. Among these travelers was Alex, a spirited adventurer who thrived on spontaneity. With a backpack slung over one shoulder and a camera hanging around their neck, Alex moved through the crowd, soaking in the sights and sounds. This city wasn't just famous for its beauty, it was steeped in tradition, where history came alive in every cobblestone and monument. One of the biggest draws for visitors was the Grand Palace at the heart of the city square. Its towering spires and intricate carvings were breathtaking, but what truly captured everyone's attention were the guardsmen stationed outside. Clad in striking uniforms adorned with medals and plumes, they stood tall and unwavering, exuding an aura of discipline and pride. Their polished boots gleamed under the sunlight, and the bayonets attached to their rifles glinted sharply, adding an undeniable sense of authority to their presence. Alex couldn't help but feel drawn to the scene. There was something mesmerizing about the contrast between the bustling energy of the tourists and the stoic stillness of the guardsmen. People gathered around to take pictures, some even posing beside the soldiers despite clear signs warning against getting too close. Most visitors respected the boundaries, content to admire from afar, but there were always those who pushed the limits, hoping to get a closer look or maybe even a reaction. As Alex approached the square, their mind raced with thoughts. They had heard stories about these guards, how they didn't flinch, no matter what happened around them. It was almost like they weren't human but statues carved out of resolve and duty. Curiosity tugged at Alex, urging them to test the legend themselves. What would happen if someone broke the rules? Would the guards react, or would they remain as immovable as ever? These questions swirled in Alex's head, planting a seed of mischief that quickly grew roots. The closer Alex got to the guards, the more intense the atmosphere became. The rhythmic click of cameras filled the air, punctuated by occasional laughter and chatter. A child ran up to a guard, waving excitedly, only to be gently steered back by a parent. Nearby, a tour guide explained the significance of the palace and the role of the guards in protecting it. But Alex wasn't listening. Their eyes were fixed on one particular guardsman, a figure so perfectly poised that he seemed almost otherworldly. His rifle rested effortlessly in his hands, the tip of the bayonet catching the light with every slight movement of the crowd. It was then that a reckless idea took hold of Alex. Without fully thinking through the consequences, they decided to see how far they could go. After all, what harm could come from a little harmless fun? Surely, nothing bad would happen in such a crowded place, surrounded by so many witnesses. Confidence, or perhaps recklessness, surged through Alex as they stepped forward, inching closer to the line that separated spectator from spectacle. Little did they know, this single decision would set off a chain of events that neither they nor anyone else could have anticipated. As Alex stood just a few feet away from the guardsmen, their heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The crowd around them continued to buzz with energy, oblivious to the storm that was about to brew. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing the grandeur of the palace and the stoic figures guarding it. But Alex wasn't focused on the beauty of the moment. They were fixated on the gleaming bayonet held firmly in the guard's hands. It seemed almost hypnotic, catching the sunlight with every slight shift of the soldier's stance. The idea that had taken root in Alex's mind moments earlier grew stronger. What if they could touch it? Just for a second. Surely, nothing bad would happen in such a public setting. The thought of testing the unshakable composure of the guardsmen felt thrilling, like stepping into forbidden territory without getting caught. After all, these soldiers were trained not to react, right? How far could someone push before they cracked? With a deep breath, Alex took another step forward, closing the gap between themselves and the guardsmen. The crowd around them didn't notice anything unusual. Everyone was too busy snapping photos or chatting excitedly. No one paid attention to the lone tourist inching closer to the line of respect that separated visitors from the guards. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly yet pass in an instant, Alex reached out. Their fingers brushed against the cold steel of the bayonet. For a split second, time froze. Alex felt the weight of what they'd done sink in, but it was too late to turn back. Gasps erupted from nearby tourists who had seen the unthinkable act unfold. A woman clapped her hand over her mouth in shock, while a man holding his phone lowered it slowly, unsure if he just witnessed something real or imagined. The once lively chatter faded into stunned silence as dozens of eyes turned toward Alex and the guardsman. The soldier didn't move. His posture remained as rigid as ever, his gaze fixed straight ahead as though nothing had happened. If Alex had hoped for some kind of reaction, a flinch, a glare, even a subtle shift, they were disappointed. The guardsman's discipline was unwavering, a testament to years of training and dedication. But the same couldn't be said for those watching. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves, each person sharing their disbelief with the next. Did you see that? They actually touched the bayonet. What are they thinking? Some people shook their heads in disapproval, while others whispered nervously about what might happen next. Parents pulled their children closer, ensuring they stayed well away from both the guards and the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, Alex stood frozen, their hands still hovering near the bayonet. They hadn't expected this level of attention. In their mind, it had been a harmless prank, a fleeting moment of rebellion against authority. But now, surrounded by wide-eyed onlookers and the looming presence of the guardsmen, reality began to crash down on them. Within seconds, nearby officers noticed the commotion. Two uniformed men stepped forward, their expressions serious as they approached Alex. One of them gestured firmly, signaling for Alex to step aside. The playful confidence that had driven Alex to reach for the bayonet evaporated instantly, replaced by a growing sense of dread. As they were ushered away from the scene, Alex glanced back at the guardsman one last time. His face remained impassive, betraying no emotion, but the message was clear. Boundaries existed for a reason, and crossing them came with consequences. The crowd parted to let the officers through, many shaking their heads or whispering among themselves. Some recorded the incident on their phones, eager to share the shocking moment online. Others simply watched in stunned silence, wondering how something so seemingly small could escalate so quickly. For Alex, the world suddenly felt much smaller and far more complicated than it had just moments ago. As the officers led Alex away from the scene, the weight of what had just happened began to settle heavily on their shoulders. The once bustling square now felt eerily quiet, as if the entire city had paused to witness the unfolding drama. Tourists who had been snapping photos and chatting excitedly just moments ago were now silent, their eyes following Alex with a mix of disbelief and disapproval. Some whispered among themselves, shaking their heads in judgment, while others simply stared, unsure how to process what they had seen. The two officers guiding Alex moved with purpose, their expressions stern and unyielding. They didn't say much, but their body language spoke volumes. Every step felt heavier than the last for Alex, who was beginning to realize that this wasn't going to end with a simple warning or a slap on the wrist. The playful confidence that had driven them to grab the bayonet had vanished completely, replaced by a growing sense of panic. What had seemed like a harmless act just moments ago now felt reckless, even foolish. Nearby, the guardsman remained motionless, his gaze fixed straight ahead, as though nothing unusual had occurred. His composure was unwavering, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around him. But the ripple effects of Alex's actions were undeniable. Officers stationed nearby had already begun securing the area, ensuring no one else attempted to approach the guards or disrupt the solemnity of the palace grounds. A small crowd lingered, watching intently as Alex was escorted toward a nearby security post. Phones were held high, capturing every moment of the incident to share online. As they reached the edge of the square, Alex tried to explain themselves, stammering out half-formed excuses. "It was just a joke," they said, their voice trembling. "I didn't mean any harm." But the officers weren't swayed. Their job wasn't to judge intent, it was to enforce the rules that protected both the Guardsman and the integrity of the historic site. One of them glanced at Alex briefly, his expression unreadable, before replying firmly, "You'll have to explain that to someone else." The walk to the security post felt endless. Each step brought new waves of anxiety as Alex replayed the moment over and over in their mind. Why had they done it? What had possessed them to cross such a clear boundary? They knew the signs were there, warnings not to touch or interfere with the guards, and yet they had ignored them in favor of a fleeting thrill. Now, surrounded by authority figures and an audience of strangers, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a grave mistake. Inside the security post, the atmosphere shifted. The noise of the crowd faded into the background, replaced by the low hum of conversation between officers. Alex was asked to sit down while details of the incident were recorded. Questions came quickly. "Who are you? Where are you from? Do you understand the seriousness of your actions?" Alex struggled to answer, their thoughts jumbled and disjointed. They wanted to defend themselves, to explain that it hadn't been malicious, but the words caught in their throat. How could they justify something so impulsive, so thoughtless? Outside, the crowd began to disperse slowly, though the story was far from over. Videos of the incident spread like wildfire across social media, sparking debates about respect, cultural boundaries, and personal responsibility. Some viewers ridiculed Alex, calling their actions disrespectful and immature. Others expressed sympathy, suggesting that mistakes happen and that the punishment should fit the crime. Meanwhile, local authorities used the opportunity to remind the public of the importance of respecting national monuments and the individuals tasked with protecting them. Back inside the security post, Alex sat quietly, their mind racing. They couldn't escape the reality of the situation. What had started as a momentary lapse in judgment had spiraled into something far more serious. As officers continued their investigation, Alex braced themselves for what lay ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the consequences of their actions would leave a lasting impact, not just on them, but on everyone involved. The hours that followed felt like an eternity for Alex. Seated in a small, dimly lit room at the security post, they were struck by the stark contrast between the lively city square they had left behind and the cold, sterile environment they now found themselves in. The walls were bare except for a clock ticking loudly above the door, each second amplifying Alex's growing anxiety. Officers moved in and out of the room, their faces impassive as they exchanged clipped sentences and reviewed documents. For Alex, every sound, the shuffle of papers, the creak of chairs, the distant murmur of voices, felt magnified, a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. After what seemed like forever, a senior officer entered the room and took a seat across from Alex. His demeanor was calm but firm, his eyes fixed on them as he began to speak. "Do you understand why you're here?" he asked, his tone neutral yet probing. Alex nodded hesitantly, though the full weight of their actions still hadn't fully sunk in. The officer proceeded to explain the seriousness of the offense. Tampering with a guardsman's equipment wasn't just a breach of protocol. It was considered a violation of national security. Guardsmen weren't ordinary soldiers. They were symbols of the country's heritage and pride, entrusted with protecting its most sacred landmarks. Touching their weapons wasn't merely disrespectful. It undermined centuries of tradition and discipline. Alex listened intently, their stomach churning with guilt and regret. They tried to explain again, their voice trembling as they recounted how curiosity and impulsiveness had driven them to act without thinking. "I didn't mean any harm," they said softly, their words heavy with sincerity. "I thought it would be. I don't know, funny. But now I see how wrong I was." The officer studied Alex for a moment before nodding slightly, though his expression remained stern. "Intent doesn't change the outcome," he replied. What matters is the impact of your actions. As the interrogation continued, Alex learned more about the potential consequences they faced. Depending on the severity of the charges, they could be fined heavily, detained for several days, or even banned from returning to the country. The thought of spending time in custody sent a chill down their spine. They imagined their family back home, worried and confused, wondering why they hadn't heard from Alex in days. The idea of being labeled as someone who disrespected another nation's culture weighed heavily on them, too. How could they ever make amends for something so reckless? Meanwhile, news of the incident spread rapidly beyond the confines of the security post. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage, memes, and heated debates. Some users condemned Alex's behavior, calling it reckless and offensive. Others defended them, arguing that while their actions were foolish, the response seemed overly harsh. Journalists covering the story interviewed locals, many of whom expressed frustration over tourists failing to respect cultural norms. One elderly woman, whose family had served as palace guards for generations, tearfully described how such incidents tarnished the dignity of those who dedicated their lives to preserving history. Back in the room, Alex couldn't escape the feeling of isolation. Though they were surrounded by officers, they felt utterly alone. Their mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would they lose their freedom, their reputation, their ability to travel freely? Each possibility felt like a crushing blow, forcing them to confront the reality of their poor decision-making. As the officer concluded the questioning and informed Alex that they would need to remain in custody until further notice, tears welled up in their eyes. This wasn't how their trip was supposed to go. They had come seeking adventure and new experiences, not legal trouble and public shame. Yet, amidst the fear and regret, a glimmer of clarity began to emerge. Sitting there in that cold, quiet room, Alex realized that this experience might force them to grow in ways they never anticipated. It wasn't just about apologizing or facing punishment. It was about understanding the deeper significance of boundaries and respecting the values of others. For the first time since grabbing the bayonet, Alex allowed themselves to truly reflect on their actions. And though the road ahead promised to be difficult, they knew it was one they needed to walk if they hoped to learn from their mistakes. News of Alex's arrest spread like wildfire, igniting passionate debates across social media platforms and news outlets. The incident became a global talking point, with opinions sharply divided. Some condemned Alex's actions as reckless and disrespectful, labeling them as yet another example of tourists disregarding cultural norms for the sake of a thrill or a viral moment. Others were more sympathetic, arguing that while grabbing the bayonet was undeniably foolish, it didn't warrant such severe consequences. "People make mistakes," one commenter wrote. "Shouldn't we focus on teaching rather than punishing?" Amid the online frenzy, Alex's family and friends scrambled to support them from afar. When they first heard about the arrest, shock and confusion rippled through their close circle. How could someone as adventurous and kind-hearted as Alex end up in such a predicament? Friends exchanged frantic messages, trying to piece together what had happened, while family members contacted embassies and legal experts in hopes of securing assistance. It wasn't long before they hired a lawyer who specialized in international law, a seasoned professional named Clara, who quickly stepped in to navigate the complex web of legal proceedings. Clara wasted no time getting to work. She reached out to local authorities, gathering information about the charges against Alex and exploring possible avenues for resolution. Her calm demeanor and sharp mind provided some comfort to Alex's loved ones, who were overwhelmed by the situation. Meanwhile, she urged Alex to take full responsibility for their actions, emphasizing the importance of sincerity and accountability. "This isn't just about you anymore," Clara explained during one of their early conversations. "It's about showing respect for the culture you've offended and proving that you're willing to learn from this experience." As Clara worked behind the scenes, public opinion continued to evolve. Local officials seized the opportunity to highlight the significance of respecting national traditions and symbols. In interviews and press conferences, They reiterated the importance of understanding boundaries when visiting historic sites. One official stated, "Our guardsmen are not props for entertainment. They are guardians of our heritage. Their role is sacred, and any interference with their duties undermines the values we hold dear." These statements resonated deeply with many citizens, reinforcing the notion that Alex's actions had struck a nerve far beyond mere rule-breaking. Despite the mounting pressure, Alex's supporters rallied around them, determined to ensure their voice was heard. Back home, friends organized fundraisers to help cover legal fees, while family members spoke openly about Alex's character. "They're not a bad person," Alex's sibling told a reporter in an emotional interview. "They made a mistake, yes, but they're also someone who cares deeply about people and cultures." This has been a wake-up call for all of us. These efforts helped humanize Alex in the eyes of the public, shifting some of the narrative from condemnation to compassion. Meanwhile, Alex remained in custody, grappling with the whirlwind of attention surrounding their case. Though they appreciated the support pouring in from loved ones, they couldn't ignore the guilt gnawing at them. Every news report, every comment online, served as a reminder of the ripple effect their impulsive decision had created. But amid the chaos, something unexpected began to emerge, a sense of resolve. Alex realized that this ordeal, as painful as it was, offered an opportunity to grow, not just personally, but also as a bridge between cultures. With Clara's guidance, Alex began drafting heartfelt apologies, addressing not only the guardsmen involved, but also the nation whose customs they had unintentionally disrespected. They poured their emotions into these letters, acknowledging their wrongdoing and expressing genuine remorse. "I never meant to cause harm or insult," Alex wrote, "but I understand now that my actions went beyond a simple mistake. They hurt people who value their traditions deeply. For that, I am truly sorry." Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Alex's willingness to own up to their actions gave hope to those advocating for leniency. The court hearing loomed on the horizon, promising to be a pivotal moment in determining Alex's fate. Would justice lean toward punishment, or would it allow room for redemption? As the world waited for answers, Alex prepared themselves to face the consequences head-on, knowing that whatever happened next would shape not only their life, but also how others viewed accountability and forgiveness. The days spent in custody were unlike anything Alex had ever experienced. The small, sterile cell offered little comfort, and the hours dragged on endlessly. At first, Alex struggled to find any sense of peace amidst the isolation. The weight of their actions pressed down on them constantly, making sleep nearly impossible. But as time passed, they began to notice small details about their surroundings: the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the distant echo of footsteps in the hallway, the occasional murmur of conversation between officers outside their door. These mundane sounds became a backdrop for deep reflection, forcing Alex to confront not just what they had done, but why they had done it. In those quiet moments, Alex's mind wandered back to the events that led them here. They replayed the scene at the palace square over and over again, dissecting every decision that had brought them to this point. What had driven them to reach for the bayonet? Was it curiosity, boredom, a misplaced desire to test boundaries? Or was it something deeper, a lack of understanding about the significance of the guardsmen and their role in preserving cultural heritage? Each question unraveled another layer of self-awareness, leaving Alex with a clearer picture of their own shortcomings. Their thoughts weren't limited to introspection, though. In the shared spaces of the detention facility, Alex encountered others whose stories added new dimensions to their perspective. There was a young man who had been arrested for shoplifting after losing his job during the pandemic, and an older woman detained for accidentally overstaying her visa while caring for a sick relative abroad. Listening to their struggles reminded Alex that everyone makes mistakes, but the key difference lies in how we respond to them. These conversations sparked empathy within Alex, helping them see their situation not as an isolated incident, but as part of a broader human experience. As the days turned into weeks, Alex threw themselves into writing heartfelt letters of apology. With Clara's encouragement, they crafted messages addressed to the Guardsman, local authorities, and even the general public. Each word was chosen carefully, aiming to convey genuine remorse and a commitment to learning from their misstep. "I failed to respect your traditions," one letter read, "and for that, I will always carry regret. Please know that I am using this experience to grow, to become someone who values cultural differences and works to protect them." These efforts didn't go unnoticed. When Clara visited Alex to discuss the upcoming court hearing, she brought encouraging news. Some officials had taken note of Alex's sincere apologies and willingness to take responsibility. While the charges remained serious, there was a growing sentiment among certain groups that punishment should include elements of education and rehabilitation rather than solely confinement or fines. This gave Alex a glimmer of hope, but they knew the final outcome still hung in the balance. Beyond the walls of the detention center, Alex's story continued to resonate with people around the world. Social media buzzed with discussions about accountability, cultural sensitivity, and second chances. Some critics argued that Alex's actions warranted strict consequences to set an example, while others praised their efforts to apologize and learn. Schools and community organizations began incorporating the incident into discussions about responsible tourism and respecting cultural boundaries. Even journalists highlighted Alex's journey, framing it as a cautionary tale with potential for redemption. Through it all, Alex emerged changed, not broken, but humbled. They realized that growth often comes from discomfort, and that true accountability requires more than saying sorry. It demands action. As the date of the court hearing approached, Alex felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Whatever happened next, they vowed to turn this painful chapter into an opportunity to give back, to use their voice and experiences to educate others and prevent similar mistakes. For the first time since the incident, Alex felt a flicker of optimism. The road ahead would be challenging, but they were ready to face it head-on. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse, microphones in hand, eager to capture every detail of the case that had captured global attention. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Rows of spectators filled the benches, locals curious about how justice would be served, journalists scribbling notes, and even a few tourists who recognized Alex's name from headlines back home. The air was thick with tension as everyone waited for the proceedings to begin. Alex sat at the defendant's table, their hands clasped tightly together. Clara, their lawyer, leaned in occasionally to whisper words of reassurance, but Alex's nerves were undeniable. They glanced around the room, taking in the sea of faces watching them intently. Some looked sympathetic, while others wore expressions of disapproval. It was impossible to tell what the outcome might be, but one thing was clear. This moment would define not only Alex's future, but also how the world viewed accountability and redemption. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. After a brief introduction, the prosecution began presenting its case. They outlined the seriousness of Alex's actions, emphasizing the violation of laws protecting national monuments and personnel. "This isn't just about touching a bayonet," the prosecutor argued. "It's about undermining centuries of tradition and discipline. We must send a message that such behavior will not be tolerated." Their tone was firm, leaving no room for ambiguity about the severity of the charges. Next, Clara stood to present Alex's defense. She spoke calmly yet passionately, highlighting her client's remorse and willingness to make amends. "Mistakes are part of being human," she said, addressing the judge. "What sets us apart is how we respond to them. My client has taken full responsibility for their actions, written heartfelt apologies, and expressed a desire to educate others about cultural sensitivity. Punishment should aim not only to correct, but also to rehabilitate. And Alex has shown through their conduct that they are committed to change." As Clara concluded, Alex rose to speak on their own behalf. For weeks, they had rehearsed what they wanted to say, determined to convey their sincerity without excuses. Taking a deep breath, they addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for my actions. I never intended to disrespect your country or its traditions, but I understand now that intent doesn't erase impact. What I did was reckless and selfish, and I take full responsibility for it. This experience has taught me so much, not just about the importance of respecting boundaries, but also about humility and growth. If given the chance, I promise to dedicate myself to promoting cultural awareness and ensuring that others don't repeat my mistakes. The courtroom remained silent as Alex finished speaking, their voice trembling with emotion. Even the sternest faces seemed to soften slightly, acknowledging the raw honesty in their words. After a pause, the judge thanked both sides and announced that a decision would be made shortly. The wait felt endless, each second stretching longer than the last. Finally, the judge returned, his expression unreadable as he delivered the verdict. Alex was found guilty of violating laws related to national security and public order. However, the sentence reflected a balance between accountability and rehabilitation. Instead of extended jail time, they were ordered to pay a substantial fine, complete community service focused on educating travelers about cultural respect, and participate in programs aimed at fostering cross-cultural understanding. Additionally, Alex was banned from returning to the country for 5 years, a punishment that stung deeply but reinforced the gravity of their actions. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, Alex exhaled a shaky breath. Relief washed over them, not because the consequences were light, but because they knew they had been given an opportunity to rebuild and contribute positively. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, but Alex stayed quiet, choosing instead to let their actions moving forward speak louder than words. Though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, they left the courthouse with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to turn this painful chapter into something meaningful. Months after the court hearing, Alex returned home, forever changed by the whirlwind of events that had unfolded in a city far from their own. The journey back wasn't just physical, it was emotional and transformative. What had started as an adventure filled with excitement and curiosity had turned into a lesson in humility, accountability, and growth. For Alex, the world no longer felt like a playground to explore without thought. It now seemed richer, more complex, and deserving of respect. Back in their hometown, life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy, but Alex carried the weight of their experience everywhere they went. Friends and family welcomed them with open arms, eager to hear about what had happened during those weeks abroad. At first, Alex hesitated to share too much. They weren't sure how others would react, or if they could truly convey the depth of their remorse. But as time passed, they realized that talking about their mistakes was part of the healing process. It allowed them to reflect, to learn, and most importantly, to educate others. Determined to make amends, Alex threw themselves into advocacy work. They began speaking at schools, community centers, and travel clubs, sharing their story not as a cautionary tale of shame, but as a call for mindfulness and cultural sensitivity. Standing before audiences, Alex recounted the moment they reached for the bayonet, the arrest, the courtroom drama, and the lessons they had learned along the way. "I thought I was being adventurous," they would say, "but I ended up crossing a line I didn't even realize existed. My actions hurt people who value their traditions deeply, and for that, I'll always feel regret. But I'm using this experience to help others avoid making the same mistake." Their talks resonated with listeners of all ages. Students preparing for study abroad programs took notes furiously, vowing to approach new cultures with care and respect. Families planning vacations asked thoughtful questions about how to navigate unfamiliar customs responsibly. Even seasoned travelers admitted they had never considered the impact of seemingly harmless actions, like taking photos too close to sacred sites or ignoring posted signs. Through these conversations, Alex discovered a newfound purpose, turning their misstep into a force for good. In addition to public speaking, Alex collaborated with local organizations to create educational materials aimed at promoting responsible tourism. They worked closely with educators to develop workshops for young people, teaching them about the importance of understanding and honoring cultural differences. Online, they documented their journey through blog posts and videos, reaching audiences worldwide. Each piece they shared emphasized the same message: travel is a privilege, not a right, and it comes with responsibilities. The incident continued to follow Alex online, where debates about their actions still flared up occasionally. Some commenters remained critical, accusing them of seeking attention or trying to profit from their mistake. Others praised their efforts to grow and give back, calling their transformation inspiring. Alex read these comments with mixed emotions, but chose to focus on the positive feedback, the messages from strangers thanking them for opening their eyes or encouraging them to keep going. Those words fueled their determination to keep moving forward. Though the ban from returning to the country weighed heavily on Alex, they accepted it as part of their penance. Instead of dwelling on what they had lost, they focused on what they had gained: a deeper appreciation for the world's diversity, a commitment to fostering understanding, and a renewed sense of responsibility. They often thought about the Guardsman whose bayonet they had touched, wondering if he ever saw their apologies or understood how profoundly his presence had impacted their life. In quiet moments, Alex sent silent thanks, not just to him, but to everyone who had played a role in helping them grow. As months turned into years, Alex's story became less about the mistake itself and more about the redemption that followed. They proved that even the most reckless decisions can lead to meaningful change, if one is willing to face the consequences and learn. And while the memory of that fateful day lingered, it no longer defined them. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far they had come, and how much farther they could go in making the world a better place.